Beginning of the summer, I had two goals. I had many goals, but one was to speak this summer, and one was to come to Columbus, Ohio. My accountant, who's been my accountant for over a decade, and I've told him I love him so many times it's awkward. I had to start Venmoing him money to take his wife out, they live here. So I was like, this is the summer, I'm coming to see you. And so when you sent that email, I was like, I manifested this moment. So say your dreams out loud. Columbus, Ohio, apparently was mine. So thank you for having me today. I was about 4 years old, laying on the couch in a dark room. Standing over me was my oldest brother, with a flashlight in one hand and tweezers in the other. And I was terrified. See, being the middle child of the youngest siblings, anytime we played Pete the Magic Dragon, I was always chosen to be Pete. Only this time I'm standing in my room. Oh, and I have to get in full costume, obviously. So green crayons is the most economical option for a 4-year-old to find to stick in their nose. I'm standing in the room and I hear footsteps coming up the stairs. In my haste, I rip out the crayons, but this time a piece broke off inside my nose. So there I am, laying on the couch, looking up in the darkness, absolutely terrified. I was terrified that I was in trouble, for one, because I grew up in a yelling house. I was terrified that I was going to end up at the hospital having to get it removed. But even more than that, I was terrified that that green crayon was slowly melting into my brain and going to turn me into Slimer. This was definitely my future in my 4-year-old brain. But the message that kept being told to me in that moment was, you're okay, calm down, you are okay. And this wasn't from a bad intention. They weren't trying to hurt me or harm me. They were trying to reassure me that ultimately I was going to be okay. But I didn't feel okay. And this was one of thousands of moments that I was told to ignore what I was feeling, and that what I was feeling was wrong. I learned not to trust myself, and I lost confidence in the messages that my body was sending me. So, like many of us, we ignored what we were feeling. I put those emotions into a glass jar and shoved them into the back of my brain. If you've seen Inside Out 2, incredible movie, shoving those emotions. We are taught to do that when we are told to ignore what we are feeling. We receive the message that having emotions is weakness. I was called a crybaby, insensitive, and that wasn't a compliment. We're told if you're having anger, if you're showing anger, control yourself. Having emotions is weakness. But here's the problem. My emotions kept firing all day, every day, but I was unable to access them. See, our emotions fire whether we want them to or not. You don't get to choose emotions. You don't get to opt out. Now, you may be thinking, no, girl, I have gotten really good at this. I am so numb, my feelings can't even feel anything. Some of you have or feel like you've opted out of emotions. But let's go back to even just a few minutes ago. Rachel is announcing the next speaker. You're sitting in your chair. You have energy in your body from the amazing exercise that we just did, but you're in a pretty neutral spot. And then you see this blonde girl, the music coming on, and an emotion hits. You may have felt joy. You may have been like, that's my jam. Dancing Queen, that is my jam, and I see you. You may have felt fear because you're like, oh, this isn't working correctly. Everything needs to be happening. Fear, what is happening? What am I supposed to do in this moment? You may have felt shame, like, I am uncomfortable. I would like to just step away now. You may have felt lonely because maybe you wanted to keep moving your body, but you were the only one, so you felt alone in that moment. You may have felt guilt for not participating and leaving me to dance by myself. Emotions happen whether you want them to or not. You don't get to decide when they fire or what is firing, but you do get to decide what happens next. And the problem comes when we can't actually recognize which emotion is firing. I doubt any of you in that moment thought, "Oop, this is shame. I'm feeling shame right now." Or, "For sure lonely, I'm feeling lonely." Instead, emotions can show up as a tightness in our chest, a weight in our gut. Clammy, palmy hands. Does anyone ever get those sweaty hands when you're feeling an intense emotion? You may just freeze. If I just stay frozen, then no one can see me. You freeze in place. You may want to hide under your chair. Or you may be like, "Yeah, girl, I can't help but move my body when I hear a song come on." See, our bodies feel the emotions. Whether we recognize them or not, our bodies still respond. Oftentimes, my coaching clients, when they first start coming to me, they're experiencing hives, lockjaw, migraines, gut issues. You hear about, oh, you need to control your stress, and that's how you'll fix whatever ailment you're having. Our bodies are still feeling and responding to the emotions that are firing. The power comes when we can actually identify the message that emotion is trying to send it and get underneath that message to know why it is there. And that's exactly what I am going to teach you today. I am Tera. I have been married for 16 years to my very best friend who is willing to be Dumbledore for me for Halloween. I have 4 young kids that challenge my emotional regulation every single day. And about 4 years ago, my husband and I learned this program, the connection codes. It was just taught in a private practice by a marriage and family therapist, our founders, Dr. Glenn at Phyllis Hill. And when I found it, I practically banged at their door every day and wedged my way in until they gave me the power to come and share this with the world, because it's a message that everyone needs to hear. It transformed my life. And I'm going to share with you today 3 steps of how to learn how to identify and process your emotions so you can use them as your superpower within yourself and in your relationships. One of my favorite things that we believe at the Connection Codes is that you don't need better intentions. No one woke up today and thought, "Oh man, that fight I'm gonna have later, that's gonna be awesome. I cannot wait to fight with my partner about that." Or the fear that's gonna hit me at 3 o'clock that's gonna leave me paralyzing, whoo, that's gonna be a great time. Everyone wakes up with the best of intentions. We want to connect in our relationships. We want to reach our goals and to feel confident in our bodies, but we need better tools. So step 1 is a magical 5-word question, and this question has honestly changed everything for how I show up with my husband and my kids. And that question is, what is happening with you? Or what is happening with me? See, right now, we often ask the question, why? Why am I so dumb? I've said that to myself more times than I am proud of. Why did you forget to switch out the laundry? Why won't you have sex with me? When we say the word why, it becomes an accusation. In fact, I was coaching a client yesterday, and she was processing a conflict she'd had with her husband earlier in the week. He had jerked the car, and she was like, "I told him that I had fear, but his response to me was so harsh." And I said, "Okay, well, let's go back to that moment. He jerked the car, and then what happened next?" She said, "Well, I just said, 'Why did you do that?'" And even as the words were coming out of her mouth, she recognized, oh, I just put him on the defense. He immediately felt accused of doing something wrong. But instead, when we can switch that out and say, what is happening? We open ourselves, it's an invitation into our own experience. What is happening with me first? And then our partner's experience of what is happening with you? And then we can actually get to the core, which leads us into step number 2. And that is to find the message that your brain is trying to send you. So we have 8 core emotions found in 5 neural regions of our brain. We have joy, fear, shame, guilt, sad, hurt, lonely, and anger. And you may be looking at that list and thinking, but why are so many of them negative? I want to be in a zen place. I don't want all those negative emotions. But emotions are not good or bad. They just are. They are a neutral place, and we're going to talk through each of them right now in their message. So joy. Joy is the one we are all trying to get to. We all love joy. It feels good in our body. And its message is, yes, give me more of this. I want more. But joy can actually be very damaging. Joy is the reason I can eat an entire pan of brownies and not think twice about it. Joy is the reason I lay in my bed in my sheets in the morning instead of getting up to reach my goals. Joy is the reason that people drink too much. They cheat on their spouse. Joy can drive us, when it's unprocessed, to really detrimental behaviors and outcomes. We also have fear, and fear is our protector. It keeps us safe. It's the reason we stay in our lane on the interstate. It's the reason we make choices for our life to try to protect our home and our family. It keeps us safe. We need fear to stay alive. Then we have the disgust region of our brain, and that's where we have shame and guilt. Shame is I am. There is something inherently in me. I feel small, embarrassed. It's about our core. Where guilt is the action, I did. We feel guilt over something we have done. And the message of it is, do not repeat. Let's show up a little better tomorrow. Just don't repeat this behavior. Now, there are times where these emotions fire, and when we get to the core of it, we realize it's a message someone else told us. Maybe it's something we need to let go of and process and talk with someone about, because we can feel shame over things that aren't inherently true. So to be able to recognize it and process it out, we can rewrite our thought process around the thing. The next region is our pain region, and it is what it feels like. We want to move away. Hurt. Don't touch that stove. That is hurtful. Get out of this painful relationship. Pain shows us to move away. Sad is to find connection. Meet with someone. You need connection. Lonely is get support. You need support in this area of your life. So pain helps us both move away from something and find connection. And lastly is anger. And I'm not lying, I love anger. Anger is my friend, and anger is our driver. It's our action taker. It means something needs to change. And the part about anger that's a little tricky is we can have core level anger, and that's where it is true, deep anger. And I find myself having core level anger when we talk about social justice issues, when there's wars taking place, when there are guns in our schools. I feel core level anger, and that moves me to want to change. But then we also can experience secondary anger, and this is where it's tricky. Often what we see is secondary anger. So, for example, if my child is coming and they're super angry about something, if I'm only trying to treat that symptom and not get underneath, it's usually a fear or a shame, there's another emotion that's driving that anger. So often when I feel myself getting angry, especially with my kids, I'm like, ooh, what's actually happening with me? Oh, it's shame. Okay, I need to talk about that. I need to process that and figure that out instead of just hitting on the anger. So when you look at each of these, they all serve a purpose. They are all there to guide us, to protect us, and we need them. And actually, you may also think like, I really just don't want to feel that. Like, I don't want to acknowledge when I feel pain. I don't want to acknowledge when I feel fear. But like I mentioned earlier, our goal is to move you out, where right now it can get stuck in our bodies and creates a lot of damage, both within us and in our relationships. So being able to recognize them, that gets us back in control. And I actually really struggled with joy prior to really the last year. I started paying attention to my joy. In motherhood, I had lost my joy, and being an entrepreneur, our busy lives that we lead, COVID, I had lost touch with joy. But actually being able to process the pain and the fear and the sad and the shame, I now am living in joy in a brand new way. So while it does feel like, there's 7 negative and 1 positive, you get to actually experience the positive in a much deeper way because you're no longer drowning in the negative. Or, no, I shouldn't say, in the pain. You're not drowning in the pain. And that leads us to the last step, step number 3, and this is where it really becomes your superpower. And that's when you can use these emotions to connect with those around you and in yourself through the emotion. See, right now, we spend a lot of energy second guessing what our partner is thinking. They walk in the door and they're grumpy and we automatically assume, it's my fault. I've done something. They are upset with me, and we spend the rest of the evening tiptoeing around them. Ooh, don't fall. Fear. We also spend a lot of energy talking sideways with each other. I'm just gonna leave this laundry in the middle of the floor and maybe they'll notice it at some point. Or the dishes, or leave clues about my birthday presents that I'm wanting, and hopefully they'll pick up the clues. We talk sideways with each other. We also spend a lot of energy arguing over the logistics of life, and that's actually how the connection codes really first started. Our founders, Dr. Glenn and Phyllis, were standing over the scene of the crime, their dishwasher. I mean, how many of us have fought over dishes? It's pretty embarrassing how many times, let's be honest. They're standing over the scene of the crime, and Dr. Glenn had unloaded the dishes, and Phyllis approached him and said, "Thank you for unloading the dishwasher, thank you." And he responded, "It's not the only thing I've done today." And they'd had encounters like this thousands of times. And typically, Phyllis would just disconnect. And they would spend the next several hours, maybe even days, arguing, but it would always come back to the dishes. But instead, in that moment, Phyllis decided, I'm gonna do this differently this time. I'm tired of this same cycle. And she leaned in and asked, "What's happening? What do you hear me say when I say that?" And he responded with, "You don't think I do enough around here. I don't feel like I do enough around here. So let's throw a party because Glenn actually did something in our house." And in that moment, she realized, oh my gosh, what he is hearing from me is totally different than anything I've ever intended for him to hear. And she realized that when we can get to our core, we can actually connect with each other. So from that moment, Glenn actually went back and got his marriage and family therapist license, and he developed the core emotion wheel. And this is the 4-minute tool that teaches you how to get those emotions back out of the back of your brain, get them back in charge of your console so you can connect with yourself and with others. So the first time my husband and I ever did this, we were about 3 to 4 weeks into COVID. And we're best friends. Like, we have a great relationship. We'd been spending 24 hours a day, 7 days a week with each other, as we all had in that season of life. And if you had asked me 10 minutes before this moment, do you know him? I'd be like, I know literally everything about this man. There is nothing I don't know about this man. But he went through the wheel and he shared with me his sad that he was experiencing. And in that moment, everything changed. Everything changed. I had no idea that he was experiencing this sadness in his body. And even worse, I was contributing to it. I was making it worse unintentionally. And it's not that he didn't even want to tell me. He didn't have the language how. He didn't know how to share what was happening in his body. So that is exactly what the core emotion wheel does. We start out doing it every single day, and you go through the wheel and you share every single emotion when you felt it most recently. And if you can't think of a recent time, you think of a big time that you felt that emotion. It could be 2 weeks ago, 5 years ago. Sometimes I process things from my childhood that come up and I realize, whoo, that was stuck in there. So the goal is for you to actually identify what the emotion feels like in that moment. That way on Tuesday at 3 o'clock when the guilt hits, you can be like, oh, that's guilt, that's what I'm feeling. Okay, this is what's happening for me right now. So you're building your emotional muscle, so then you can recognize it in real time and stop conflicts before they even start, because you're able to get to your core so quickly. The second part of it is that when you're doing it with your partner, you never interrupt them. We create safe space for each other. How many of us are like, I can't even talk to them because they get defensive? I was the queen of defensive. I was the most defensive. I could defend myself. Like, I'm sitting here defending myself right now. I could win that war. Or we're a fixer, like, let me just fix this for you. But we just want to be heard. We just want to be validated. So when we are sharing, it's called the ooh. We just do a non-verbal response, like, oh yeah, I hear that. That's a lot. I get what you're saying. And so we're actually going to do this today. We are going to do the core emotion wheel with each other or with yourself here in just a few minutes. But I do wonder, what could happen if you were able to process your emotions quickly without being weighed down by them? What could happen if you could connect quickly with your partner without creating conflict? I live that now. What could happen if you stopped living in the pain, shame, fear, and could show up with confidence in your body and your life? So I'm going to demonstrate how to do the core emotion wheel before we break into our people or with ourselves to do it. A part of me, I'm just gonna be really honest. A part of me wants to like script this part out, so it's like, yeah, I'm just gonna be honest with what is happening with me in this exact moment. So anger. I felt anger this week. I needed to get a kid to Jiu-Jitsu and he did not want to go and I'm paying for it. And I felt a lot of anger in that moment that he was refusing to get dressed. I felt shame. Walking in this door, imposter syndrome is real. Felt a lot of shame, like, who do you think you are? I felt guilt. My husband wanted to fly up here to get some of his hours in for his pilot's license, and I wanted to drive, and so we drove. So I felt guilt that I didn't show up for him in that way. I felt fear. I felt a lot of fear in that moment when I was about to trip. Holy moly. But even just being here, dancing, lonely, being on this stage is kind of lonely, guys. Every speaker here, I see you. Great job already. This is a lonely spot to be. Sad. I feel sad. This week, I broke my streak of 10,000 steps a day. I've been doing it every day for over a month, and honestly, my joy took over, and I focused on a project instead and missed my steps. I feel hurt yesterday. We were practicing my talk in the car, And Wes responded kind of harshly to me at one point. So I felt a lot of hurt in that moment, which we were able to process and not have conflict over. And I felt joy. Oh my gosh, so much joy in this space. And just walking in here, seeing everyone's faces, all the intention that Rachel put into every activity, every thought process she had for this event. So much joy. And so now I'm gonna ask each of you, if you came with a partner, and we're gonna spend the next 5 minutes for you to connect with your partner. If you didn't come with someone and you still want connection, find someone else, and do this with them. Again, you can make something up. You just want to tap into how that emotion feels in your body. And if you're like, I need to do this solo for a minute, just go ahead and put your head down so people know you're not available. Write in your notebook or in your notes section of your phone and go through every emotion and when you experienced it, most recent, big, or make something up. And we'll come back in 5 minutes.
If you do want to partner up, just make eye contact with someone next to you as like an invitation, like you, okay, let's do this. So, let's go ahead.
Oh, good, he turned it off. Okay, great. So at the end, how much time do we have? We probably don't have time if there's any questions. You tell me. Okay.
I don't know. I'll ask Kevin.
Okay, yeah. So I don't know when we started and all of that.
Yeah, I know we started a little bit late, so I expect that we'll go a little bit over. Yeah, I would try and give it a couple minutes and then take do 1 or 2 more minutes and then okay. I'm not a stickler for time, but also
Then I'll call it back in. Yeah, it's short, but then we're going to do questions. Do you get screen photos? I know that she's going to send me photos. Do I look like I'm sick? Yeah, we get a video of this moment.
Yeah, that's one thing. Recording.
Oh, okay, so say if them doing this just to show them. It's fine. You do you, boo. reach for his hand.
All right, are we getting close? We're gonna wrap up. Just a few more seconds. Okay, I'm curious for yourself, even just to think and reflect on either what came up for you or what came up for your partner. If there was anything surprising in there, maybe you even surprised yourself with something that you had been feeling that you didn't even realize that you had been feeling. That was such our story. And early on in starting this process, it can be difficult. It can feel sharp to hear, especially if we've hurt our partner. But we all mess with each other. We all mess with each other. But being able to honor their experience, that is how you can connect with them. And so there's so much more to learning all of these tools that I can't teach you today, but I did want to have access. There's a video on how to use this tool that I teach, how to do it by yourself, but then also our founders, Dr. Glenn and Phyllis, have a video where you can see how to do it with your partner and more on when those sharp edges hit. So if you want to access that video, you can use this QR code. And
I'll send it out too. I'll do a follow-up email.
thank you. That's amazing. I love that. At the Connection Codes, one of the biggest things that we want people to recognize is that you have the right to exist. And that it's your emotions that make you human. That is what separates us from robots and AI, which is apparently our new biggest competition. But emotions are what make you human. And to ignore them is to ignore your own humanity. To recognize them and process them while using them to connect with yourself and with your partner, that is the greatest superpower that you can have. So if you have questions, I'm around today. And we can take 2 questions? Is that what you said?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for letting me talk to you today. Thank you. I can go. Okay, we have a couple of minutes. If anyone has a question or maybe something came up that you want to talk about, think
Quick
about.
share. Raise your hand if you want the mic. Are you raising your hand back there? Okay, just stretch.
She's like, no, not me.
Anyone going once? Going
Okay, great. Jeremy, I know your name from the name game.
Yeah, well, right. I think when you were, the part that I was kind of interested in, and it resonated with me because I think a typical thing we want to do when it comes to emotion, like talking about the right or wrong, is like, this is my personal experience, but like where you kind of want to suppress something, especially like you were saying, like you're bottling up because it's maybe too much.
Yeah.
Do you have any tips, or I guess my question is kind of around, is there a potential way that it could be hindering by like leaning into it, you know, opening up that area that you might be leaning into, still like suppressing it, if that makes sense? Like when you were talking about like process things, like what that kind of looks like. I don't know if that's a good question. I don't know if that makes sense, the question, or if there's one in there, but it.
No, absolutely. So what I'm hearing is there's something in there that you are like, okay, I think I need to get this out. And that is exactly what this tool does. So I would encourage someone in that to, when you have a situation, so like if I wanted to process my father abandoning me when I was a kid, I would pull out the wheel, because that's something that a lot of people experience, great? And we dive in and use all of the tools. Like I would be like, I feel anger that he ignored me that time at the airport, and I feel sad that he thought he could just buy me off when I met him, and I feel shame that I met him without telling my brother. I feel fear that I'm gonna have to see him again at some point. So I would just go into each emotion when it comes to that situation, and we call that an issue-specific core emotion wheel. And being able to talk about it is healing to your brains. Actually, sharing our stories is healing to our brains. But then to be able to co-regulate with your partner, to be able to actually share with her what that experience was like for you, that is even a deeper level of connection to yourself and processing it. So there are times that you may have something that's so stuffed, you may have to process it several times. Doing it once isn't enough. I process things multiple times along the way, but it's getting it out of your body. Did that help? Okay. Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much to Tera for that. So I was just, as she was talking, thinking back to planning this event, being on under an immense amount of stress, and people asking questions that I couldn't answer. And I was thinking, Kevin, who's my friend over here who helped put this on, it's like, why did Kevin make me do this? He said it was a really good idea, and I was just having a moment of like overwhelm, and then I really looked at the emotion wheel and I was like, okay, that's my fear, that's my guilt, and it wasn't coming out in that way, but when I like paused to like realize, I'm like, this is why we're doing this. Okay, we can do this, we can do hard things. So thank you for getting us in touch with how we can tap into our emotions in a really short and sweet way. And this is also for like parent-child relationships, friendships, like it's applicable across all types of relationships. So, thank you, thank you. Okay, next in Rachel's Notes Roulette. I wanted to let everyone in here know that like we all come from like a variety of different places in the spectrum of love right now. So we have people in this room that are in like really new honeymoon stage relationships. We have people that have been in here